Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Greater Miami Expressway Agency Board meeting. I would like to call our meeting to order at 9:08 a.m. And I would like to ask Board Member Blanco to lead us. And I would like to ask Board Member Blanco to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much. Before we formally begin our meeting, I would like to officially welcome our two newest board members. We're excited to welcome Board Member Edward Peterman and Board Member Stanley Rigaud, who's on the phone, who were appointed by the Miami-Dade TPO. And I will ask each of you to make brief remarks if you would like, as we welcome you to the board.
I can't outdo that. No, just I'm super excited. Thank you for that warm welcome, and I'm looking forward to getting to work to improve transportation in Miami-Dade County.
Well, thank you very much. Board Member Rigaud, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, good morning. I share the sentiment of the previous person there. I think I just happy to be part of this group and looking forward to contributing so that we can make Miami-Dade County a safer place for our residents. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and we hope to see you maybe at our next board meeting here. So,
Absolutely.
and I also would like to congratulate Board Member Pages for once again being seated by the Miami-Dade TPO as the governor's appointee. So I'm very excited about that. So now I will ask our corporate board secretary to conduct a roll call of board members.
Good morning. Board Member Blanco,
Present.
Board Member Miller, Board Member Peterman,
Present.
Board Member Rigaud, Treasurer Pages, Vice Chair Perez,
Present.
Chair Cancio.
Present.
Complete.
Next, we have a declaration of voting conflicts. Board members, at this time, please advise if you have any conflicts based on the items on the consent agenda or regular agenda. Hearing none, we move. Now let's move to our public comment period for the agenda items. A member of the public wishes to address the board, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak. I will now recognize Mr. Alston to identify those who have signed up to speak. Mr. Alston, you're recognized.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the board. No one has signed up to speak at this moment. However, if a member of the public wishes to address the board, please approach the podium at this time. Any member of the public that wish to address the board? Seeing none, back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is approval of the meeting minutes from the May 9th and May 30th meetings. Board members, you have had the opportunity to review the minutes. Is there any discussion or is there a motion for approval?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Now we are on to the consent agenda, and I will now ask our general counsel to read the consent items into the record.
The administrative items are the approval of proposed travel for Executive Director Alston for 2024, 2025, and also approval of parcels identified as excess real property or surplus real property, and authorization to advertise for competitive bids to lease or sell these parcels as applicable. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Board members, you've heard the consent agenda, and now is the time to advise me if you have any items you would like to pull from the consent agenda.
I would like to discuss item 2. I don't necessarily want to pull it unless I have to pull it in order to discuss it.
I think it can be discussed.
It can be discussed. Okay, we can discuss it.
Okay, thank you. So the process by which we sell and/or lease parcels is a pretty standard process. Florida Department of Transportation has policies associated with that for how we accomplish those goals, their state statutes, et cetera. The selling of parcels, as long as they are wholly owned by our agency and weren't part of the operation and maintenance transfer, but were purchased with bond revenue or cash from GMX, I don't have a problem with the sale of those. I do still have some questions regarding leasing parcels that are owned in fee by the Florida Department of Transportation, and just would like some additional clarification. In theory, I don't have an issue with it occurring once those clarifications are made, and I am confident in the process by which that which we use and whether that authority was granted as part of the operation and maintenance transfer agreement. That's my only concern there. But I don't have a problem with the sale of parcels wholly owned by GMX, but want clarification on the lease.
So I've also had questions regarding this, and I think it's important to note that this is just, I think, an initial authorization for them to look more into it. Nothing is going to be leased, sold until it comes back to us. I think this is a process of analyzing, what it is that it's, it's due diligence. I think perhaps this approval of parcels to ask for advertise for competitive bids, maybe that's premature, because from what I understand, nothing is going to happen until it comes back to the board. Because I agree with you that I'm not sure about the leases from land that it's owned by FDOT.
And I guess from my clarification on the sale issue, if we do an intent to sell, and I think it comes back to the board as an action to actually sell the property, not to do further due diligence on that. So, and clarify for me, but that's the way I understood it. But again,
I think it's something that Executive Director Alston can shed light. You're recognized.
Yes, I'll start, and then I'll ask, and I know I've had a couple individual conversations, so now we're in the public forum with board members on this item. And I'll ask our Director of Budget, Finance, Accounting, CFO, along with our Director of Engineering and Emergency Management to kind of follow suit. But yes, the intent, so actually back up. Many of your concerns are understood. The intent of this item was to initially start some due diligence. We added some language that you should see in the item. Once we do some due diligence, any additional sale or leases from the agency would come back to the board for further discussion. I think there was some conversation with some board members if there are certain things in the pipeline already. I know that was or at least a question, at least from a few of you. So because of that, that is why we added that language for additional due diligence and conversation from the board. I'm going to ask, and I know you asked a very key question as well in our briefing, and I think our CFO does have that answer ready. So if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I ask the CFO to chime in.
CFO, you're recognized.
Good morning, thank you. During the briefings, there was several concerns regarding this item. We are going to go through the due diligence process, and anything that is going to be sold will come back to the board as an action item. I believe there was concern about leasing DOT property and what happens to the revenue base. I am not the attorney, but based upon our previous practice as well as the transfer agreement, it does indicate that we have the ability to improve, maintain, operate, own, and lease the expressway system located in Miami-Dade County, and so forth. And then we're able to fix, alter, change, establish, collect tolls, revenues, and other charges for the service and facility of the system. And then we're also able to utilize surplus revenue to finance, maintain, and operate the expressway system. So that's the language in the original agreement. And in practice, that's how we're able to lease excess parcels, utilize that revenue base that goes through the normal flow of funds or revenue to operate, to pay our debt, and so forth. So that was in practice and what we have done in the past. With that said, I defer to legal counsel to look at that a little bit more closely, whether or not that's still consistent.
I have a question. So are you saying that only the sales would come back to the board and not the leases?
The leases would come back to the board as well. So when we enter into a lease agreement, I think it's beneficial to the board to understand the terms of the agreement, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, and what's the compensation, and what is also the use of the property. Because it may be, a scenario where we need to make sure that we're compliant with state statute on how we lease a property and what it is utilized for. So both of those items would come back to the board.
Thank you. Counsel, you're recognized.
I think with any proposal that comes back, it'll go through the regular legal vetting after staff has any proposal. We'll present it and be able to answer questions on the legality of the arrangement.
So are we just consenting and agreeing that these parcels are what staff has determined to be surplus properties, that we're going to look into maybe selling or leasing, but nothing obligates us to sell or lease? I mean, I don't want the agency to get into an agreement to sell the property and then we'll be in breach because we say we don't want to sell it. So how does that work, Jason?
I would say that we would not execute anything until it's gone through the legal vetting, comes back to the board, and we'll look at everything, including, any Department of Transportation, State of Florida rights in with respect to the terms of the transfer agreements. And then the staff would propose those to the board. We'll be able to answer questions after the legal review, and then you can make a determination if it's a policy you want to move forward with.
So perhaps a question to the CFO. In the past, when this happened, I imagine other surplus property was sold in the regular course of business. Would the agreement say this is contingent upon board approval?
The agreement would be presented to the governing body. It would not be executed until the board took action. So you would see the agreement if we were selling a property, and once you approved it, then we would execute with the potential buyer. Lease agreements in the past did come to the board. We showed, the bids that we received for a specific lease. And then we usually have, and I think it's in our policy, what are the standard leasing terms and what are the requirements of the lease? But I think we need to take another look at that to make sure we're compliant with the state statute as a state agency now.
So is that something that we need to amend maybe in our policies?
I think it would be beneficial to have legal take a look at it once again, yes.
Okay. So can we do that at the same time that we approve this consent item, or should?
If I could, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Olson.
If council agrees, so I think with the item, along with the direction just given collectively by the board, if there's agreement, I think that should suffice for kind of next steps for staff on what we need to do to come back to you, the board.
Excellent. I just want to make sure that we're transparent and clear that we're not selling, leasing anything until, before it comes back to us to review and approve.
I'm clear, along with a separate opinion, which I clearly understand from Board Member Miller. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so any further discussion on the consent agenda?
Well,
Yes, Board Member Pages.
we're going back and forth on this. I want to make sure I understand. Is there anyone at GMX, anyone, or a group of anyone that has authority to lease or sell property on behalf of this agency?
Not that I'm aware of at this time. It would all have to come to the board for,
Only the governing board has
the
that
board
authority.
has that authority.
Thank you.
correct.
Thank you.
So are we ready to vote on the consent agenda? Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any final discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just for the record, if I could, through council, just making sure the motion is to approve the consent agenda along with the direction just given by the board collectively.
That is correct, Ms. Charleston. So all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion passes. Next, we will move to the regular agenda, and the first item is GMX procurement contract number MDX 18-02, system-wide toll collection modernization services. And I will now recognize Mr. Alston to introduce the item.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is approval to amend a cooperative purchase agreement with TransCore. I'll ask our Director of Toll Operations and Transportation Technology to further expound on the item.
Good morning, board members.
Good morning.
So yes, item A is for the modernization services with our current toll systems integrator, which is TransCore. These services are, this actually item is tied to B, but I'll go through A first. Item A is basically to purchase all the equipment that's proprietary to TransCore, and it's also including all the services. Now, what this will give us is it'll give us an opportunity to upgrade to the latest software, which is what has been currently used and implemented on the Turnpike. And this will do several things, including improve our efficiencies in actual toll collection. It'll give us a backup server, which is a hot site, off-site, and more than anything, it's mitigating risk for potential hardware failure. Currently, the system, the hardware that's out there is 5 to 9.5 years old, and it's pretty old for servers out in the field. Moreover, we are pushing more than twice the amount of volume that we were when these systems were put in place to begin with. So it is my recommendation to move forward with the implementation of all the hardware in the field. So this is all the servers on the lane side, so we can use and be more efficient and have all the bells and whistles that we could get from the new software. This will also eliminate a lot of the manual collection that we do and manual auditing. This will give us some dashboards so we can monitor the system more closely on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr.
if I
Alston.
could just do one follow-up. I know there was also a question in one or a few briefings. Claudio, you could just also confirm about the products made in the U.S. If you could also make that statement on the record.
Yes, thank you.
Well, that's actually for item B, but I believe the question was made if there's anything coming from China.
Yeah.
We looked into it. Dell, all the servers are produced in Texas. So while there may be components from what we researched, there's components coming from Korea and other areas, but from what we can tell, nothing is coming from China, and all the servers are assembled in Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Alston, for bringing that up. That was one of my concerns. The public should know that we go through extensive briefings before this board meeting with staff, and they're so well prepared and they answer questions. Sometimes we don't bring them up at our meeting, but my concern of hacking, security, whether it's made in China, these are some of the discussions that we had with staff before. So I'm very pleased to have a response. Board Member Miller?
I would just clarify, and you're right, we should know. I imagine, given these are products that are purchased statewide by not just this agency, but other agencies as well, those are all vetted. Most of us in the government arena use Dell products, and we do, as a Florida Department of Transportation, purchase certain products as well. So I'm sure those are all vetted before, as we're piggybacking on other contracts per se, then those are all pre-vetted from a Buy America perspective and ensuring that there's no issues with.
Correct.
Foreign.
So this item particularly is actually this item covers all the proprietary equipment that's manufactured directly from TransCore themselves, and those are the lane servers and things like that. Item B will be the more generic stuff that we'll be purchasing from Dell, but yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Board Member Pages?
There's a couple of examples or analogies you used. I want to make sure we put it on the record. This is probably one of the most important items we've looked at since we've been here. This is a massive upgrade to where we are. Your example of the iPhone,
Yes.
I think, is very relevant. I want to make sure that we get that into the record because I think that
Right.
everyone understands the iPhone. I understand
Yeah.
what we're doing here. So if you can explain that, I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So Transcore is actually the same vendor that one of the vendors that Turnpike uses, and they've done extensive R&D on this particular operating system, and we can't install it on our system, right? Because it's the analogy that I gave at the briefings was it's like if you have an iPhone and you want the nice latest operating system, but you have an iPhone 6 and you can't install it, and otherwise you'll crash your phone. This is basically the same thing. We need to upgrade our hardware, not only because of its age, but in order for us to implement the new operating system, which will give us, like I said, the dashboards, one of the most important pieces is the tri-protocol, right? This is the interoperability agreement that we have signed as an agency, and all total agencies have signed to make sure that for the customer it's easy, meaning that if you have an easy pass or you have any other type of transponder, you can use our system and you'll be billed accordingly. Right now, I want to clarify, customers are being billed accordingly, but us as an agency have to go through a whole different process to get that invoice billed accordingly. Now with this upgrade, we can do it at the lane level. So basically what we're doing is we're paying for the hardware to upgrade our system, and Transcore is going to give us, and we're going to be able to run the latest operating system. So our system, in essence, is going to be as if we had procured a brand new system today. That's what we would be getting now in the field, and that's very beneficial for the agency. We're basically using all the R&D that's already been done.
Also, as a treasurer, I have an obligation to make sure we follow the financial aspect of this. Can you also share with us your estimated payback on this
Sure.
project?
So the benefits of this come from different areas in terms of actual improvement in toll collection. One of the issues that we have frequently is the vehicle separation. And if you see, there's a line here that we're actually going to be testing some equipment, and that's going to help with detecting vehicle separation when we're at very slow speeds and bumper to bumper traffic. We, based on our calculations, one of the things is, like I just mentioned, the interoperability. It costs us about 11 cents to process a transaction that's video toll versus 2.5 cents when we do an AVI transaction. So there's a savings there when we go to tri-protocol. We estimate that this will be paid for roughly in 2 to 3 years. Now, if you recall, the contract was extended, or not, let me rephrase that. It was not extended. The budgetary ceiling was increased to take us to the original 10-year term. Most likely, we will be bringing back before the end of this contract an extension, so we can get the benefit out of this, because the life cycle of this is roughly 7 to 8 years. So I will be most likely recommending an extension so we can get the best return on our investment for this.
And the last question is the timeline for implementation?
Right. So should it be approved today, we will be ordering equipment, and about 60% of this will be installed in this fiscal year, and the balance will be installed later years. Now, I believe that's a little bit conservative on the second year. What our plan is to do is to start with the least risk areas, because what we want to do is we want to set up the new servers, have everything running, make sure everything is running, and then switch over. And then, but if we get everything rolling and we feel comfortable with the process and the commissioning, then we'll move it faster. But the timeline is about 2 years.
Okay, and the last question, as far as policy is concerned, I am a little surprised that it took this long to do this, and we're actually facing pretty dramatic risk. I understand there's a lot of political issues, I believe, in the last couple of years. But having said that, I mean, it was absolutely irresponsible, but irresponsible as the governing board to have allowed our systems to have reached a point where they are today. We're fixing it now. It's going to get fixed. Is there a policy in place or a process? I know there's a new asset policy coming in place. Is that where we're going to deal with this issue as far as a timely, ongoing review of this matter?
No, the asset policy is actually with the field.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the tolling components.
Okay.
It's more the infrastructure and how we program life cycle of pavement, asphalt, guardrails, things like that, sign
Yes.
structures. This is separate. There's no specific policy right now. We can, but honestly, technology changes so rapidly that I don't believe putting a policy in place would be the appropriate tool for this.
All right, we'll discuss it during the policy agreement. Thank you.
I have just a small question. The agreement says that in addition to the maintenance and servicing, that they will also do the air conditioning and the UPS units.
Yeah.
Is that something that they were not doing before?
That's correct. So this contract was originally piggybacked 7 years ago from the Turnpike contract, and that was not included in the contract. So one of the things that we negotiated with Transcore is we're buying new hardware so that their current contract, they maintain the system. So what does that equate to? It definitely is a benefit for the agency, but it's also a benefit for the vendor in terms that it's less maintenance or less risk of maintenance, right? They have to go out there and fix it. So one of the things that we negotiated is, all right, I'm removing some of the responsibility in terms of maintenance. You need to give me something in return. So they will be now taking on all the maintenance of the air conditioning units at the toll sites, which is something that we do and is quite cumbersome for us. And B, the backup systems. When, let's say, there's a power outage, there's a battery bank that takes over in the meantime while the generator turns on. So they will also be taking on all the maintenance of those equipments.
That's great. Thank you.
Can I just add a note through the chair?
Yes, of course.
Just to clarify on the air conditioning, obviously the UPSs are specific to their components, but when we're talking about the air conditioning, there's what we refer to as icebox or ice cube components that's more specific to their equipment, and they're like smaller in nature, so it's little it's 8 little air conditioners that cool their equipment. Those are the ones that they're going to be now responsible for. We were maintaining those in the past. Now they're going to be maintaining those. We will still have the responsibility of maintaining air conditionings in the shelters and in the facilities.
Yes,
So
I'm
I just want to make sure that we
yes,
distinguish
correct.
that.
No.
It's not
Just related to the
headquarters.
equipment.
It's related
Yes.
to the shelters and the actual cabinets
Right.
that house all the servers. Because if they get hot, they turn off.
No, exactly.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the
Board Member Peterman.
the air conditioning system, is that going to be changed out with this hardware change out, or it's just a transfer of the maintenance?
They're transferring maintenance. We've actually gone through an extensive process in the last 2 years to change out all the air conditionings. Even they're very critical actually for the tolling systems, and they're redundant units. So we'll run one for one day, and then it'll switch to the other one, and we'll go back and forth. So we've gone through a process of basically changing most of them out in the last 2 years. There's some that are still a little bit older, but the majority of them have been switched out. This agreement is basically for them to maintain them moving forward. So they have to do all the preventative maintenance.
Do they have integrated like alarm systems to know when there's a failure that automatically it alerts somebody to be able to go out and check it out?
Yes, and I'm looking at our field tech, and he gets calls regularly at 3 in the morning to go out there when something's wrong.
It always happens at 3 in the morning, right?
Yeah, always. And on a Friday. So yes, there's alarm systems that we have in place. We're actually in the process this year of implementing more monitoring systems. So right now we just get an email basically saying, hey, there's an alert, but we're going to have additional monitoring systems to alert all of us. Yes. And that goes for the backup battery system as well.
Tara, I just have one question.
Yes, of course.
So I'm excited about being able to sort of transfer this responsibility. So I assume there's a service level agreement that provides timelines and expectations associated with that maintenance in the contract with them.
Yes, if this is approved, we're gonna give them all of our logs, and we're gonna expect them to have a log of every time they service, and there's expectations of how many times they have to service it, what they're gonna be doing, and their timeline for replacing units when they go down.
Okay, and it's a timeline also from the standpoint that if we're changing over that responsibility and an alarm goes off, are we still going out there during an alarm scenario, or are we having an expectation that they're out within a certain amount of time after that alarm goes off?
Yes to both.
enough.
So basically, in the past, the problem is we have the keys. We don't like giving out our keys or access to some of our shelters. So unfortunately, when an alarm goes off, I'll get a call. Wadi or our field folks will get a call. And most likely, we usually dispatch one of our inspectors or someone that represents the agency, if not ourselves, to actually open the door and stand there when a tech is doing a repair. We're actually in the process of putting access cards in all of our toll shelters. That way, one, we can monitor and we know exactly who's coming in and out. So that would eliminate some of the times that we would have to actually physically go out. So yes, there's going to be timelines to all these repairs.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may.
Board Member Blanco.
Claudio, can you speak about the current failover disaster recovery that is in place for the current system and what we're going to have post these upgrades?
This is one of the biggest advantages that I believe this provides. Right now we have a backup, which is a cold site, what we call cold site. So we feed information to there nightly, and it's a backup, right? But it's not. If we had a catastrophic event here at headquarters, let's say there was a hurricane or we had a flooding event, God forbid we never have one again. But if our servers go down, we can't just instantly switch over to the cold site. It takes time to get everything running. With this, we would be implementing a full-blown hot site, which is basically a replication of our servers here at the traffic management center in our racks. So what that means is that if something happens at this building, we can instantly switch to the other building. So that definitely gives us peace of mind, and it gives us operational control, and we can switch on and off. So even maybe when servers don't go down, but let's say our main trunk line gets hit, we can also reroute all the information to the TMC.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Ralston.
One more thing, Madam Chair, members of the board, that we didn't discuss. I think we hit all the points that I recall with each of you individually. Is that this item also follows 287. So now that we are in a new fiscal year, we have to work with the Department of Management Services on any piggybacks going forward. So just want to highlight that this item, along with the next item, falls in that category. Just wanted to say that for the record.
Yeah. Yes, we will be going through DMS to make sure we're actually ratifying the original piggyback that was done 7 years. If once DMS approves, then they will be submitting for approval of this supplemental agreement as well.
Is there a motion for approval to amend the cooperative purchase agreement with TransCore LP to include system-wide toll collection modernization services in the amount of $3,029,496?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Motion passes. The next item on the regular agenda is approval to issue purchase order in the amount not to exceed $2,600,000 for the purchase of Dell hardware required for the completion of the toll collection system modernization project. And I will now recognize Mr. Alston to introduce the item.
Sure. Again, Madam Chair, members of the board, this is the item I think we touched on a little bit. I'll turn it back over to Claudio to do another high-level overview of the item.
Okay, so item B is in essence the balance of the hardware that needs to be purchased to complete this modernization. The reason they were broken up is basically this is all the equipment that is non-proprietary to TransCore. And the reason we broke it up is for a financial reason more than anything. We are proposing to utilize one of the state contracts with Dell, which is part of the NASPO. It's the Computer Equipment, Peripherals, and Related Services contract. And basically what that does is the state of Florida negotiates these contracts with these large vendors in order for all the state agencies to benefit from a lowered price. In this instance, we're saving about 15% on the actual purchase price of the equipment. Furthermore, if we were to go directly through the TransCore contract, they're entitled contractually to a 10% markup. So by us separating all the equipment that's not proprietary to them and purchasing it our own, we're saving 10% and an additional 15% on the actual equipment. This is also subject for DMS approval, and we will go through them to get the approval of the NASPO contract and then move forward should this item be approved.
Are there any questions?
I do have a question.
Yes, Board Member Blanco.
Is there any TransCore? Do they have any issues with the fact that we're bringing in our own hardware? Is there anything in any sort
No,
of contracts?
there was extensive coordination, and that's the reason they specifically recommended that we use Dell. The reason being, one, for uniformity of the system. B, that's where they've done all their testing, and that's where they've done what they're using elsewhere in the state. So we didn't want to introduce some sort of hardware that may potentially cause issues. So that's why we're specifically recommending the NASPO Dell contract, because there's already R&D and testing that was done with this specific equipment.
Great. But there isn't anything that they wouldn't do because of the fact that we're purchasing the hardware ourselves, even though it's the recommended hardware. that they're?
No, if we were to gone through them, they would have purchased the same equipment. So we're just basically purchasing the same thing they would have, but ourselves, so we can save money.
All right.
And I do want to say what's important here is also that this equipment belongs to the agency. It's not like we're buying this equipment for the vendor. It belongs and will be operated here for the agency. It's the agency's property.
I have a question. So the vendor's fee for modernization includes installation of the system that
That's
we're
correct.
buying?
Yeah, the 3 million that was just approved is
Correct.
for all the installation and all the equipment that's proprietary to them. So yeah, once we purchase this, we basically hand it over and then they do all the installation.
Yeah, I commend you for separating it and for the 25% saving basically that we're getting.
Thank you.
Board Member Pages.
And the maintenance.
And then it's
Yes, and the maintenance. So is there a motion for approval to issue purchase orders in the amount not to exceed $2,600,000 for the purchase of Dell hardware required for the completion of the toll collection system modernization project, work program number 40058-000?
Move it.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion passes. The next item on the regular agenda is discussion and approval of the, let me see. I'm sorry. The next item on the regular agenda, it's our fourth round of board policy reviews. And I will now recognize Mr. Alston to introduce the item.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So as you know, as a board, you passed GMX policies very early on. And as you referenced, Madam Chair, this is the fourth round or maybe the fifth or sixth round. I think we had one or two additional tweaks from board members as well. But we're excited because the treasurer gave us some great guidance on the first round of finance policies, the two that are before you. And then the engineering policy, we worked, of course, with and got feedback from Board Member Miller in her capacity as district secretary through FDOT as well. So I'll ask the team also to give a quick overview, and then we'll pause for questions from the board, if that's your pleasure, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. The two policies on the financial administration side are the budget policy as well as the toll policy. I'd like to just make a comment that there are additional policies that will come back to the board at a later time. The investment policy, we will be working with the treasurer, so we'll bring that back to the board at a later time, as well as the procurement policy will come towards the latter part of this calendar year. We'll come back once we have a thorough review from our legal team. On the budget policy, the main changes, budget policy is we put into the policy what we actually do in practice. We incorporated language that the CFO will make a recommendation to the executive director on contingency releases. We also will include on the 5-year work program, which is the majority of the changes, that if any new project or revised project is proposed, operational maintenance costs will also be incorporated into the analysis. And then no projects that is approved by the governing board can increase its overall cost with the exception of budget release contingency. The other addition is that no project can be moved forward from year 5 to year 1 without an analysis from the finance department and ultimate approval from the executive director. Those are the new changes that are in the budget policy. On the toll policy, we incorporated language, again, what we've done in practice to ensure transparency, that if there's a toll rate increase or CPI adjustment, that it goes to a public outreach process, whether it's social media, whether it's physical outreach, or whether it's radio or print. So we incorporated that into the policy. We also incorporated into policy that GMX will seek, will notify a municipality on a potential project and potential new tolling point. And we removed the language to seek approval because ultimately the approval of a project lies with the governing body. So we changed that to notification. Those are the changes in the two policies on the finance side.
Good morning. On the strategic asset management policy, this is a new policy that we're introducing. Basically, it provides a framework and guidance or guidelines on how we will monitor, assess, improve, and maintain our system in accordance with all guidelines, standards, requirements, and making sure that we're in compliance with our trust indenture and all of our other bond covenants. So it just really sets up that framework. And in reviewing the language, it's pretty open-ended. It's not specific to just roadway items. So we can definitely incorporate all the technology toll side of the agency's components into the development of a strategic master plan or asset management plan to make sure that we address how we are maintaining all of our technology components like our ITS equipment and particularly all of our tolling facilities and how that gets updated and maintained. So this policy would be all-encompassing for the agency, not just specific to any specific asset, but all assets.
But I thought I heard Director Diaferia saying that perhaps the technology should not have a specific policy since the technology changes so quickly.
Again, what the policy does is it sets the framework. The policy says that we will develop a strategic master plan or asset management plan to cover all that. So we can include in that plan, we can include sections that address the technology side.
Perfect.
And then Director Diaferia would incorporate what he feels is relevant to that to ensure that we are maintaining and assessing those assets accordingly.
Perfect. Board Member Pages.
All right, I want to commend the staff on the policy review. We spent hours reviewing the budget, the toll, the investment, and everything else, and the investment will come later. For the most part, the policies are sound. They're in place. We tweaked a lot of things. They didn't do accountability, chain of command. Those things were important. Alignment of interest. Those things are important. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm comfortable with that aspect of it. The strategic asset management plan, if we can, I'd like to remove it from this approval and then kind of bring it up later. Okay. In light of the technology issue, which I didn't think about it during the thing, but I would like to be a little bit more thoughtful on how we're going to address that, as opposed to we kind of received two different in one meeting. But I want to make sure we understand it, how we're going to address it, and I want to be very specific on the technology in that policy. So, if it's okay with the chair,
Yes.
I'd like to remove item 2. I guess this is one approval item.
Yes.
Okay, so we pull item 2, and I'm fine with item 1.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes, Board Member Peterman.
Yep. Under the budget policy, and I guess it's just, I'm still learning, I've been here for a minute. Under the operational reserves, I see that the amount is 8.33%, which I guess equates to 1 month.
Correct.
And is that in this type of operation, in Expressway authorities, is that a normal budget reserve? And my concern is a catastrophic event dealing with like a major hurricane or things of that nature. I suspect that this agency, similar to a municipality, is entitled to a level of reimbursement, public assistance from FEMA and so forth. And I know that in the past at the municipal level, we've had a very long delay in getting money returned to us from, compensated from FEMA. And at least in our municipality, we've established a line of credit just to have sitting there in the event that we have a large scale event that has destructive qualities, that we use the line of credit instead of our reserves so that we can continue our normal operations in addition to the recovery from the event. Is the 8.33% kind of like an industry standard amongst expressway authorities? Do we know?
No, sir. So the 8.33% comes from the trust indenture, what the operational maintenance is required under the trust indenture, which is 1 month reserve. In addition to the O&M account that's required in the trust indenture, we have our general reserves, and we target right around somewhere around 100 to 120 $1 million. And we kept that general fund at that level more so for liquidity and for credit purposes. Unfortunately, during this transitional time, the last 5 years, we have not been able to access the credit market or line of credit and so forth, which we've had in this organization in the past. So the general reserve is generally a little bit higher. To your point, we do access FEMA, disaster recovery. But again, our reserve level allows us, the flexibility to obviously cover those costs. So
If I could, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Yes,
Just to
Mr. Olson.
piggyback, Madam CFO, do you want to highlight for the board and for the record the previously board-approved budget? How much do we have set aside for natural, 'cause I think back to your question, natural disasters, an allowance that we have in the budget the board just approved?
yeah, thank you. In addition, during our budget cycle, again, every budget cycle, we take a look at, unique aspects of a situation, but we set aside $10 million of our revenue base for in the event that we have a hurricane, that, we spend tolls and we need, additional access to, clean the roadway for, debris and things of that nature. So we do have an allowance during our budget cycle, each budget every year. And it's been anywhere from $5 to $10 million, somewhere around there.
Thank you.
Mr. Alston, is there a need to get a line of credit? I mean, don't we have enough money?
I don't see a need at this point.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So are we moving to approve these policies, removing the strategic asset management policy? Is there a motion?
Chair, I have a question too. I have
Sure.
a question
Board
on
Member Perez.
on the toll policy. And this is more, and we've had this discussion about just communication in general, under the public hearing part. Specific requirements, number 6. Where it says a public hearing shall be held, should that be must for present and future? I'm just, with the prior agency, I think a lot of the hoopla started with the toll increases and not enough communications. I'm not sure if it makes a difference or not. Does it? I'm just making sure, especially as
I
870.
think shall is more than must.
It is, but I was going to
It is?
defer to.
Okay, just making sure
legal.
because-
Yep, that's what I was, yep.
I'll defer to general counsel.
I know.
You're a very good attorney. You're correct.
Yeah, we,
So shall is more?
yes.
Okay. That was my question.
We shall do that.
Yeah, we shall.
Because there's a lot of musts, but
Yeah.
don't get done.
Exactly.
Yes, Board Member Miller.
The engineer in me just wants us to pick a framework and stick with a framework. We keep making different policies look different. Just pick a style and work that style, please. It's driving me a little insane that each time I get a policy to look at, it looks slightly different than the last one. So I just ask you, pick a frame and work the frame.
Madam Chair, board members, we will
Yes,
have
Mr.
a
Olson.
uniform design and format for all policies. And once we get to the final round, that'll come back in another 2 months, we'll make sure it's all uniform.
Thank you so much, Mr. Alston.
No. Preparing.
So we're removing the engineering policy, and we're just approving the finance policies. So is there a motion?
Move.
Second.
All in favor to approve the finance policies on the regular agenda item C1, say aye.
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 Any nays? Motion passes. So the next item on the regular agenda is discussion and approval of the executive director's employment agreement. And I know the executive search committee meeting took place right before the board meeting. So I will ask Board Member Blanco, who was tasked to lead the executive search committee, to provide an update to the board and any recommendations from the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, the executive committee met before this official board meeting to discuss the revised employment contract. I also had mentioned that I had had discussions with Mr. Alston about his salary. At the end of the day, our recommendation as a committee is that we proceed with a salary for Mr. Alston of $329,600 annually, plus and including a business expense budget of $12,000 to cover reasonable and necessary expenses. Both HR and legal have reviewed the contract, and actually they just updated the contract to include the salary number I just mentioned into the official document, and that's our recommendation to proceed.
So, for the record, I wanted to thank you for all your hard work on this issue, which I know it's not easy. And I wanted to point out that we reviewed the contract, but the amount was blank because you just decided that before our meeting. And then you added a new section about the annual business expense budget that was not in our
That's correct.
sample.
That is correct.
Okay.
In
Is
our
there
dis-
any, it's not redlined, so is there any other changes to what we reviewed?
There are no other changes other than the new section 5.5 and the salary has been inserted.
Okay. So I think we've all looked at the agreement. Basically, this was the salary that we had agreed before of 320 plus a 3% increase. Is that what you all decided?
That is taking into account certain increases that Mr. Olson did not take at the start of the year, even though other employees at GMX did. And then we discussed the matter of we believe that he should have an expense budget for certain items that he may need to handle for the agency. So we decided to add that in there.
But as I read it, this allowance, it's not that he's going to receive that money, it's just that he'll be reimbursed if he needs to use it.
That is correct.
Okay.
Jason, I haven't read the new paragraph. Did we include language for that?
Yes, we looked at some of the other contracts that characterized it as an allowance that was paid out monthly.
Right.
We changed it and made it a
Correct.
budget, and it will revert, anything unused will revert
Unused.
to GMX.
Yeah.
Excellent. So are there any other questions or comments? Yes, board member?
Yeah, I appreciate these are tough conversations and awkward at times. I am trying to understand what we believe are expenses that our executive director incurs beyond travel reimbursement, per diem, meals for travel, et cetera. I'm trying to understand what scenario he has additional expenses that would be reimbursable.
I don't know, as a business owner, I get reimbursed a lot, so I don't know.
And we're a government
right.
entity,
No, I know.
and
So-
we contract with people, right? We don't take them out to dinner. We
No, I know,
don't
but-
entertain them in any way, shape, or form. So I'm trying
Right.
to understand under what circumstances we need expenses beyond travel expenses for an executive director.
I don't know. I know that the person that I think had that position before even had $12,000 given to her in her agreement. So,
I understand that.
Right. So I don't know if that
not
does-
where we're going. So I'm just
Right.
trying to
No.
understand what the intent is.
so we're making it clear that this is a reimbursable expense. So it's going to come for approval or it will be submitted for approval. So
Correct.
And who does it get submitted to approval to? I guess would be a question. What
That's a good question.
standard?
that's a question, I believe, for our CFO.
I think how I interpret the business allowance is, I guess at an executive director level, if you're taking, commissioner to lunch, or you're doing recruitment and things of that nature, and you're incurring costs to go to lunch or, meet somebody and so forth, that's not necessarily reimbursement part of the travel policy. Travel policy, if you travel, you get your airfare, you get standard per diem for hotel and things of that nature. But, at an executive level, I mean, there's different interactions with, different community leaders and so forth. and that would be a cost on his personal, on his side. So those are kind of like general business expense, I think, that he would be reimbursed. He would not be entitled to sit with a vendor and have that vendor buy him lunch because of the fact that we have a zero tolerance ethics policy. So those are the type of, I think, general business expenses we're speaking of. Whether it is a stipend or whether it is a corporate card that he utilizes and you've set a max on that, may make more sense because you know that it's for business purposes only.
And what about, he's not getting a car allowance, right?
No.
I don't believe so.
Right,
That
so
was not-
doesn't he, how does he get reimbursed for gas, travel, mileage? I don't know, he's using his own car for agency business, right?
I believe he does not get reimbursed. I don't recall.
No, I
him.
know, there is no reimbursement on his employment agreement. This is one of the things we're saving. But at the same time, I don't think it's fair that he's doing our business, that he should be reimbursed. So I think that's maybe an example of another thing that he can get reimbursed for. I don't know. I'm asking the CFO if that's something that he can ask for reimbursement.
Does the agency have a policy for other employees, whether executive or
Yes.
bargaining, for reimbursement of travel
Correct.
expenses or use of?
So if someone uses their personal vehicle, we reimburse them based upon the state standard, which is the per mile tolls incurred and so forth. Or if somebody has to, they don't have a car and they have a Uber driver, then we reimburse the cost of the Uber driver. So we do reimburse for those type, or parking, things of that nature.
Right, so maybe amending this to include him being eligible for that agency reimbursement.
Well, I think he's already eligible for that, right?
Oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Scenario, is there a scenario where maybe there's a business development expense and what that would look like? Is that where you're, yeah?
Yes, I'm trying to
Understand
understand what
Right. How would that look like?
it gets reimbursed, not the how. Obviously, we could issue a P card and it can be done that way, or it can be a reimbursement, document that gets processed. I'm trying to understand what categories fall under that. Just given my experience as a state employee for over 30 years, what I can and cannot be reimbursed for. I'm trying to understand what we are now offering our executive director for reimbursement.
I think the contract language is reasonable and necessary business expense. So I think if he submits a request for reimbursement to the CFO and she determines it's a reasonable and necessary business expense, such as we've had a business lunch with a contractor that could not buy his lunch. I could not buy his lunch, so he would pay that. He would reimburse that. That would be a reasonable and necessary business expense, and then you have the control in place with the CFO reviewing that and approving the reimbursement. I think that would be an example.
Yeah, I just think for this level of agency, it's $1,000 a month, $250 a week, up to. It's not an unreasonable amount to put in the budget or in his contract. But he will also get a P card, right? No?
He does not have a P card specific to him as an executive, no.
Okay.
But there's a provision in the employment agreement for him to have access to a P card if he wanted one.
I don't believe so.
Section 5.4, you government purchasing card, I guess that's a P card, right?
Okay.
It is a P card.
Yeah.
So-
And then if he uses that for one of those dinners in lieu of using his own personal credit card and then getting reimbursed, I mean.
It's the same thing, right? Or is the 12,000 the maximum on the P card?
And sometimes the P cards are restricted, that they cannot be used for certain things like food and so forth. They have control mechanisms that they're only used for travel and things of that nature, for a hotel or a flight or whatever.
Correct. We set the type of vendor or type of expenditure on every specific card. And we don't have that many. We only actually have 3 cards, and they're by department at this point. They're executive, finance, and the engineering, and the toll department. Excuse me, there's 4. But no individual has a P card under their name at this point in time.
Yeah, so I think if I hear correctly, there's a limitation on what items would be approved on the P card, so that's why he would need that allowance. So I'm okay with the allowance, and I'm okay with the contract as written. Any other discussions?
Yeah, I'm still a little uncomfortable and need further clarification on how the expense would be utilized. Again, given, I realize that we can approve it and still clarify how it's used.
Right, right.
I get that, but I'm just saying I need further clarification to understand what would be reimbursable under those terms.
Sure.
Realizing we have a cap, but I'm not comfortable yet with
Is that
this discussion.
Is that something that the CFO could clarify for you later, or who would, or legal?
It's probably from my perspective, it's what we determine is fair and reasonable, right? We're saying that the CFO makes that determination.
No, I do not make the determination.
That was what was
I
just
think- I
stated,
think
so
the-
I think we just need to understand what we all consider. And
I think just to piggyback on what the legal, it really is general business expense that he would, obviously have to submit a receipt in order for the P card to be paid, the way it works currently. So it has to be a business purpose. Off the top of my head, generally the executive director, for example, if there's an event that normally the state would, state statute says you cannot use toll dollars for those things. We've had those type of things. And the executive director would actually pay a general, I don't know, we had an outreach with employees. That's something that really we don't want to use toll dollars. The executive director actually paid personally for it, and that's what the expenditure was for, it's a business purpose. And a lot of times, at executive director, you would go meet with various constituents and so forth, and you may not go to that particular dining event. You're not going to go to Wendy's, but generally if you were on your own dime to go to lunch, you just go grab something to eat. So I think it really is, and I don't want to say entertainment, but it more is business relationship type of expenditures that would be included in reimbursable in the P cards.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes.
Are we aware of anything that will fall under these kind of examples that the executive director has submitted for reimbursement over the past year that he's,
He has not submitted, but for example, I know that we had Bring Your Child to Work Day, and I believe he paid for that, and I believe he paid for, I think we had a holiday party. I think, he was out of pocket on that personally as well. Even though we are a state agency, we're a smaller agency, and it really goes back to, employee engagement, employee culture, setting the tone for the employees and so forth. So, I can think of various business expenditures that are not necessarily, things that would be reimbursable.
I agree.
And part of his job as well, I think, is relating to politicians, county commissioners in a certain way. What about if he were to attend like an event, a luncheon or a dinner, a black tie or something like that? Would that be a reimbursable expense?
I think Board Member Miller raises a good point as far as what are the standards. For example, if the executive director went to a fundraising event, that would probably be something that
No, fundraisers, no, but.
correct. And I
right.
think that's what Board Member is kind of alluding to. How are we defining business expenditures? The only thing I would say is that if you're comfortable in the concept of it, then legal would work on the language to kind of restrict it and put some parameters under it to make sure that everybody was comfortable that it met state statutes and it made prudent business sense.
Jason?
We could do that. If you, are you wanting that put into this document, or you want a subsequent report at the next board meeting with a proposal for the parameters of what's a reasonable, necessary business expense? It's
personally-
kind of hard to
I mean,
define
yeah.
the entire universe of
Right.
of items. But I know, for instance, I know he attended a conference and participated in town recently that wouldn't be travel, but for instance, like registration fees for that or any expense attendant to that would certainly be a reasonable, necessary business expense that would be outside of, I think, the travel reimbursement policy.
That would be covered under, general expenses. That
General
we
Yeah,
normally-
that's just a general expense.
Well, I
That's
don't know
what
any-
I'm trying to understand, the difference between a general expense, a travel, and what this would be used for.
Right, I think this was
I
developed
mean,
today as a
I hate to
hybrid.
say it, I go to a lot of meetings with elected officials, and guess what? I don't get reimbursed because I just pay for that out of my pocket. And I go to a lot of events, and the Department of Transportation doesn't reimburse me, and I just pay out of pocket because that's what we do as senior leadership at our agencies. So that's why I'm having a little, I'm just trying to understand what is eligible under this. I know it's reimbursable. I am trying to understand what our expectations for that are. As many of us pay a lot of out-of-pocket expenses because it's the nature of what we do. Because we're government, and we're not private. And it's very different.
Noted. Oh, are we gonna, do I hear a motion to approve the executive director's employment agreement?
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays?
I need clarification. So it's not an A, but
It's not an aye.
it's not an I.
So the motion passes. Okay. We gotta get Tori. Thanks.
Well, they can take it back. Through that door. You can-
So, General Counsel, do you have any legal updates for us?
There actually was a very good development in the litigation this week. As you know, we have one remaining lawsuit pending by the county in the now dissolved MDX challenging constitutionality of the GMX Act, and that's pending here in the circuit court. Earlier in the year, we had two adverse rulings from the circuit judge who has that case, where we argued that these claims have no legal merit and there shouldn't be any discovery, written interrogatory requests, depositions, document requests, because the claims have no legal merit. At that time, earlier in the year, twice the judge had allowed the case to move forward and said that some discovery could be done that would be necessary to prove those claims. We filed a petition at the Court of Appeals for review of that. That's been fully briefed. We're waiting on the court to either rule or request oral argument. In the meantime, we did receive voluminous discovery requests, and we did what the law requires, and we objected to all of them and did not give them anything because the claims have no legal merit. So the county and MDX filed a motion to compel, and on Monday that was heard by the circuit judge, and now she asked some very good questions about the law that we had put in front of her, and she denied their motion to compel entirely. So no discovery will go forward, and this is discovery that the plaintiffs had said would be necessary to make out their claim. So we think this was a very, very good development, and we have a motion for summary judgment on these issues, the pure legal issues that should dismiss the whole case. That's being heard on August 8th. So it was a very, very good turn of events this week.
Thank you so much. That's great news. So now we move to our our executive director's report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning again, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board. Excited to give our update from the staff side as we continue during this interim transitional stage, as I explained to two of our newest board members. And of course, we're still going through transition. I'm going to highlight some of the areas that you've asked me to focus on around governance, financial stability, daily operations, people and culture, communications, and public engagement. I think first, starting with effective governance, the best display, as the chair did earlier, was to welcome formally our newest board members. And again, from the GMX staff side, we're excited to welcome our 2 new board members and look forward to your leadership and working with you. You should know, board members, we have provided the 2 newest board members a series of documents, onboarding information, budget, work program, policies. We've conducted one agency overview with 1 board member. We provided some information to the other board member, and we'll have most of that onboarding done hopefully over the next week or so. We're also excited that July 1st, we celebrated a 1-year milestone for the agency. As you know, we posted some achievements and success stories based on your leadership and direction over the past year. We're hopeful that we get hopefully some coverage from media. We'll see how that plays out. For awareness, I think you all know as a board, this is the current, or in this current fiscal year, this is the first full year of GMX operational and management control. So if you recall, the fiscal year that just closed, GMX did not take operational control until mid to the latter part of August of last year. So this will be the first full year of operational and management control. I know that now that we just closed out the books, as I'm looking at the CFO, I know our external auditors will start doing some due diligence soon, and we'll be reaching out to board members also coming up. One more follow-up item as I look at Board Member Blanco. I think this was one of your questions, and of course of all the board members. You were very clear answering some very key questions around strategic planning and your priorities as a board. So we've used those, as you know, to develop the budget and work program that you've ultimately passed. We'll now use some of that information and guidance that you've shared to start now developing the full agency strategic plan. So we're excited that the first session will be tomorrow with our internal staff. That'll be followed up, I believe, in another 2 weeks with the staff as well. So I wanted to share that with you, the board. You have the full calendar already. You know your September and November meetings, so I won't share that. Time flies, as you said earlier. We have gone through a series of policy reviews, and I know that we have some more that are upcoming coming up at your next 2 meetings. Around financial stability, I continue to engage with all of our financial partners. We're working on an update to all of our rating agencies. S&P reached out about a month ago for an initial inquiry of the agency. We did just respond back to them within the past 7 days. We'll be sharing some of the same uniform information also with our other rating agency stakeholders. And as shared with you individually, most of the comments or questions center around governance and the financial outlook for the agency. So mostly on the positive front, we've been able to share a lot of great information from you and the board and actions that you've taken. At my most recent IBTTA event, I had a very detailed conversation with our Fitch analysts. So I know they too are also looking forward to following this meeting. Some of the information that we just shared with S&P, we'll be making sure that we share with our other 2 rating agency partners as well. Also, we're still working on our voluntary disclosure. So now that we have 7 seated board members, that is, of course, one of those substantial updates that we'll share with our rating agency partners as well. So we're working on the voluntary disclosure, and we'll make sure that comes back to the board as an FYI for you. Board member Pages joined us on the most recent ride-along. I think we had a great time. The team, I think, was thrilled to welcome and show key projects on our roadways on the system. As you know, I'll be coming around to each of you. I think we have some scheduled. I know we have some that we're planning. So just know that we'll be coming around to do many of these ride-alongs to look at our roadways. And I think Board Member Pages, I won't speak for him, I think had a very enlightening trip. But it's also a good opportunity for the staff to also hear your priorities as board members. So thank you, board members. And I know we'll be coming around to schedule those as well. On the people and culture front, excited to announce some new hires. You'll recall during the budget that you just approved, you were very clear that there are some core services that were on the consulting or professional services side that should come in-house. We've done that. These are 3 examples of those types of roles: our TMC manager, structure maintenance manager, and our contract support administrator. Is Jennifer, Yvette, or Nathalie here? I don't see. Yep, there's one. Yep. Stand up and just wave so the board can say hello and welcome our TMC manager. So again, thank you, board members, for your leadership in the prior budget. And this is an example of bringing many of those services that were professional services and core services now in-house. I traveled to FDOT District 4 headquarters just a few weeks back. If you recall, several of you, I did give the heads up, wanted to do a very public but also surprise visit to Rafael Garcia, who had served as our acting general counsel, to deliver a token of appreciation on behalf of the board and the agency. So here's a picture of that. As you know, Rafael served as the GMX acting counsel since 2021 at no charge to the agency. So again, this was just a token of appreciation on behalf of you, the board, that we were able to deliver to Rafael. And thank you again, Rafael and FDOT for your support and contribution to the agency. On the communications and public engagement front, again, I continue to have stakeholder meetings. Many of you I've talked to regarding TPO conversations, county conversations, which I do have an update that we'll share at a high level at the close of the presentation. We also welcomed Comto about 2-3 weeks ago to the boardroom. They had a reception here with other transportation leaders across the region in my honor as the new head of the agency. So thank you to Comto, and we appreciate and continue to be a partner to them. I also participate, as you know, in our monthly toll agency head meetings with the Turnpike, CFX, and THEA. We regularly share information. It's a good conversation and dialogue amongst all of the leaders across the state as we ensure that we are aligned on all fronts. So as we tee up this next video, this is, we talked about a collaborative safety campaign. If you remember in the budget, we talked about a couple of different campaigns where we work with our partners. So this is an example, board members and the public, of a safety video that was done by our toll agencies, FHP, under the guise of Be Safe Together with IBTTA. Just for background, as we're gonna tee this up and play it, we are number 6, the number 6 urban area. I think you may know from most, okay, I'll be quiet.
Association is excited to announce our participation in Be Safe Together. This new global road safety campaign aims to educate drivers and our communities on how they can contribute to making our roads safer for everyone. A significant part of this initiative is IBTTA's first Global Road Safety Week, taking place from June 24th to June 28th. Join us in participating in this campaign and help to make our roads safer. Remember, every decision you make on the road counts. Let's be safe together.
The Central Florida Expressway Authority joins the Be Safe Together campaign, which includes global messaging, digital promotion, and public and driver engagement. At CFX, we are committed to showcasing the tolling industry's dedication to safety by building and maintaining secure roads. Together, we can create a safer environment for all road users. Drive responsibly and stay safe.
Through this campaign, the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority wants to emphasize to our drivers that your little choices can significantly impact the lives of others. Whether it's obeying the speed limit, avoiding distractions, or simply making sure that everyone in your vehicle has on a safety belt, your small decisions can be impactful. So let's work together to make sure that everyone makes it home safely.
The Greater Miami Expressway Agency is thrilled to partner with our fellow Florida tolling agencies on this safety initiative. Global Road Safety Week, held from June 24th through the 28th, is an opportunity for our organizations to demonstrate our dedication to engaging with the public and drivers spread all throughout our system. Be a part of change, drive safely, and encourage others to do the same. Let's be safe together.
The Florida Highway Patrol is honored to join this vital campaign. Our mission is to ensure the safety of all road users, and we believe that collaborative efforts like Be Safe Together are essential in promoting responsible driving habits and reducing accidents.
So board members, I thought that was a good segue to demonstrate one example of what you passed as a board around safety campaigns. So as we think about our North Star, and we talked a little bit about this at our last meeting, we are the number 6 urban area for distracted drivers. Here's another stat. We are number 20 in the country with the highest travel times. So as we prepare for our strategic planning session tomorrow, those are the 2 key pointers that will guide our work. And I think I shared some of that with each of you at our prior meeting. So what's ahead? As we continue to focus on governance and financial stability, we have 2 board meetings coming up. We have the 2 finance policies that we discussed, the investment policy and the procurement policy. We'll bring back also the strategic asset management policy, either at the September or November meeting, and the AI policy that I know Board Member Blanco will also help give us some guidance and feedback on that we've discussed offline as well. We've talked about the ride-alongs. Good news, our treasurer's report, thank you to Treasurer Pages, will also start for the board going forward. I believe we're going to start that report at the November meeting going forward for the board. So you'll see now a treasurer's report, board members, that we will add. Project updates, we will demonstrate momentarily our first project update. Thank you, Board Member Miller, for that recommendation. And going forward, we will identify key projects, initiatives, and things that we believe the board and the public should be aware of from our side, from the staff side. And then lastly, I know that there was an item from the chair around the transponder outreach program. We'll be ready to share some additional details also at the next meeting. We have some preliminary information, but I think we'll be ready to share in detail also at the September meeting as we look to increase our transponder usage as well. Let me go to board follow-ups, and I'll ask our Director of Toll Ops and Transportation Technology to get ready for the county reimbursements update. I know we do have an update there. Board members, I owe 2 follow-ups to each of you collectively, and I need to get with the General Counsel. One is around the prior cyber risk assessment and penetration tests that were done. I believe there's an exemption, but I'll get with the General Counsel before I actually transmit to you, the board. But I know that was a theme I heard from several board members, so that is on the way. Also, the interoperability map, I also heard from a few board members that is coming your way also following this board meeting. So just want you to know those 2 items are forthcoming. If you don't mind, Madam Chair, could I ask our Director of Toll Operations and Transportation Technology to give a mini update on the county reimbursements? I know that there is some positive and then maybe I'll say some none information, at least on the 2 buckets.
Yes, so we have had positive communication with the county. We recently met. We've been meeting periodically with them. I'm happy to report that the $8.2 million for the reimbursement of the Dolphin Park and Ride is underway. We finalized all the documentation. We all settled on all the language, and it is scheduled now. It's in the system for the county commission. It is going to committee meetings in September, and it'll be in front of the full commission meeting in October. So once that gets executed, then we'll be able to get reimbursed. So definitely a step forward, I think. So we're on the right track there. I think it's just a matter of now timing to set it on the BCC. I do want to report that the money was allocated for. There was a small delta of $100,000, and they've already allocated that money as well. So now it's just a matter of going through the process. On the $5 million, it's a little more complicated. So, Secretary Miller, I know you're very familiar with this project. I think that the original project from the developer, which is Terra, they were supposed to do phase 1, which was at the actual park and ride. But there's a revert clause there. And so I think they're still negotiating that. But because of that, they switched the order of their development, and they were supposed to get a loan for phase 1, which was how they were going to repay the impact fees. Now they haven't. So right now we have a series of meetings set up with the developer and Miami-Dade County to establish the payment. Now the good thing is that in the past years we implemented certain things in terms of the zoning and platting that they cannot move forward unless they reimbursed. So we just have to go through those motions of meeting with them and setting up a schedule of exactly when the funds will be received. There's some money in escrow that they've deposited with the county, which is about $550,000. That can be released to us, but the balance of it, we have to work out the timing. Now, unfortunately, because the agreement will be directly with the county, it will have to go through the committee and board process as well. So that'll be a couple months.
And I'll just piggyback. I know we have a few pending meetings, I think as Claudio referenced, coming up over the next week or so, I think with a
Yeah,
few key
we're scheduled next
stakeholders. So more to come. I don't want to say too much, maybe more on the second bucket of that, but I know that Board Member Miller is clearly aware of the $5 million item along with all board members.
Can you repeat the amount again for the county? The 2 million is the one that is going to be
8.2 million, 8.2.
8.2.
Yeah.
Is 8.2 plus 5.
Correct. So
Okay.
there are two different items. 8.2 was for the reimbursement of the development of the actual Dolphin Park and Ride site, and the 5 million was for the punch through, basically for us building a bridge in order to leave an envelope for them in the future to build a roadway.
But the 8.2 is what we've been after them for reimbursement. So finally, they agreed and they're moving forward with it.
Yeah, they don't disagree on the 5 million. The county definitely understands that they owe the money. They understand that it was a request from the county to us.
Yes.
But because an ILA was never actually inked in pen, we have to go through that process to finalize an ILA, put it in front of the BCC, both in committee and an actual meeting.
Thank you.
And why do we have to speak to the developer?
We don't. Honestly, we don't. Frankly, that was kind of my response. We're not entering, well, we should not enter into an agreement with a private developer. The request came from Miami-Dade County. It's a Miami-Dade County project initiative. It's their developer. We need to deal directly with the county, and the county needs to reimburse the
I
agency
mean,
accordingly.
I'm all in favor of open communication, friendly communication. I'm all in favor of it. But I don't want to blur the lines. The county owes us $5 million, period. And we expect to get paid $5 million from the county, period. I'm not
Agreed.
sure what we're doing with the developer.
No,
Conversations.
the developer was.
Because developers only negotiate, they don't do anything else.
That's right, and
We're
that's
not
why we don't
negotiating.
want to meet with them. The developer owes the impact fees. The problem, because they switched the order, they don't have the loan to pay the 5 million. And I said, well, that's frankly not our.
Of course not, because they're using us, as I made a comment very early on, we became the bank of these special little projects. We're financing them, we're the bank, it's free loan, we finance them, it's a nice project. That's no longer happening at this agency. So I'm not sure why we're speaking to the developer, quite frankly. I would just continue down the line of the county owes.
No, I think the meeting is going to be a tri-party. It's going to be the developer with the county and us, so
Yeah.
we can establish a schedule of how the funds are, or when the funds will be right. 'Cause
Do we have
they
the
will-
ability through approvals, whatever, to just stop whatever they're doing?
No, unfortunately, the bridge is done.
Okay.
And it's actually scheduled to open to traffic later this month.
Okay,
Again, to the general public, it is definitely a benefit.
Sure,
because
absolutely.
in the future, we wouldn't have done that envelope.
Absolutely.
We would have to shut down the ramp. And it's also tied together to the Turnpike project, which is ongoing as well. So for the public's interest, it would not be a wise move to shut it down.
I think this is indicative of how we're going to move forward with projects and requests. And while we are always, as an agency and as many other agencies, we're very accommodating to partners, you have to have that inked before you allow a change order to a contract. In this case, it was a handshake, gentleman's agreement, whatever the case may be, previously, and we amended our contract with our contractor to move forward without having inked a contract with the county on that. So, and I understand sometimes timing-wise it can become difficult, but I think this is just an indication of what we want to make sure we're doing in the future, as opposed to what may have occurred with the prior agency.
I heard you all loud and clear.
Oh,
Okay.
is there a motion to approve the executive director's report?
Well, there's still under questions. Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Yeah. Can you provide an update on the 836 River Bridge? Oh,
It's coming.
it's coming.
Yep.
All right, sorry. Then
Is
hold
that the
on.
informational
I'm
item?
way ahead. I'm excited about this one.
That's information.
Thank you.
It is, yes.
Yep, sure.
I have
Remember,
a question from Executive Director Alston regarding just in general. Do we have a because we're a quasi-governmental agency? Do we have a like Do we have a registration of lobbyists? Do we have that here? We do?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
So similar to any other public agency, we do have the same forms that we require for registration. Separate on the procurement side, we also have those forms. So interesting point. When we bring back the procurement policy, what we've asked, I think Board Member Miller, you pushed this. Many of the different forms, disclosure forms, conflict of interest forms, we'll bring that back at least so you see all the policies that are referred to in the procurement policy.
A mechanism, like for instance, I think the county has like where you can put in a name
Or like
or
a-
principal or that you can actually
Like a
check
registry.
to
Do
see.
we have a-
Like a registry. Do we have
We're
that?
not, well.
We're not there?
So, sorry, we're doing this. So yes, we do have a manual registry. I think to answer your question, is it the same electronic form where you can pull?
see like in the state or
Not
in the
in
county?
that way. So that's what we were just, yeah. So it's not the same as the state or the way the county has it, but we could get there. That's kind of what we're just doing sidebar. So yes, there is a document where you could see for transparency, but it's not in the same form.
Yeah, we might want to, at some point, look at that as the way the county and the state does it, just for transparency purposes as we continue to
Got it.
evolve in that. Okay.
Is there a motion to approve the executive director's report?
Move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Passes. So next on the agenda are informational items, and the procurement report has been provided to the board with updated contracts executed and open procurements. No action is required by the board. Are there any questions on the procurement report? Are you here to speak on the procurement report?
No.
Informational item? Okay.
Sorry for my.
So hearing no questions on the procurement report, we will now move to the project updates. So today's project updates are on the assessment of the GMX Monroe County jurisdiction and an update on the State Road 836 Miami River Bridge. And I would like to recognize Juan Toledo, our Director of Engineering and Emergency Management, to lead the presentation.
Thank you, and good morning. The project update today is on the Monroe County jurisdiction and a brief update on the Miami River Bridge. So about a couple weeks ago, Director Alston, Claudio Diaferia, and our roadway operations manager, Rick Johnson, and myself took a little field trip to our newly dedicated road, County Road 94. I showed a map here so you can more or less get an idea. The road in its entirety lies within the Big Cypress Preserve, so you can see that outlined in green in the map. The actual loop road is the darker shaded color. It's depending on how you see it, it's red or purple on the screen, and it runs about 23 miles. And I'll go through some of the facts, but here's a little more of a blow up. So you can see that the road actually crosses 3 county lines: Miami-Dade County, Monroe, and Collier. The portion that was dedicated to GMX by legislation is the portion that lies within the limits of Monroe County. So Miami-Dade County still maintains a 2.5 stretch from the county line to US 41, and then Collier County maintains a 4-mile stretch from the county line to US 41 on the western edge of that. During our ride, again, what we determined was that the total loop road is about 23.5 miles. The area within Monroe County is 16.5 miles of that. 8 miles of the road is paved. So we have currently about 5 to 5 miles of paved section in the Monroe County section. The rest is unpaved gravel. We counted numerous culverts, box culverts, pipe culverts along the path to allow for natural water flow, drainage flow, and between the two ends. So the environment, they've actually maintained that pretty well. a lot of signage throughout the park, speed limits, mile markers, little designation markers, reflective, and numerous park signs for the Big Cypress Preserve and all the nature trails that access. And there's actually and I put a picture there, the Loop Road Educational Center. So right at the end of the paved section of roadway, there's an actual a facility that they use for educational purposes. We also found a lot of South Florida water management monitoring stations, as well as observed homes, park facilities, and so forth. We noticed that there's electricity that runs from the Dade County line just about to where the Loop Center, the educational center ends or is. So that obviously gets electricity and for its use. And then the one thing that we also noticed, and we haven't confirmed yet, is we found a lot of communication line markers. So I don't know if it's fiber, regular line. We're coordinating that with the other stakeholders. Speaking of the stakeholders, we recently made outreach to National Park Services and Miccosukee Tribe. We actually had a meeting with them this week on Tuesday where we talked about the jurisdiction that was given to GMX, who's maintaining the roads now. That's how we learned that it's being maintained by 3 jurisdictions. National Park Services right now is currently maintaining the area within the Monroe County line. So we would probably coordinate more heavily with them moving forward. But we need to keep everybody in the loop on what's happening there because we are in a national park preserve and we have to be sensitive to all the environmental concerns and restrictions that will go with anything that gets done on that roadway. And of course, South Florida Water Management, just to make sure that everything is in compliance there. Just some pictures so you for frame. This is a picture of the Monroe County, Collier County intersection. You can see that that's all gravel road. The paved road portion of the port, and obviously, so just you're out in the Everglades. You're in the middle of the National Preserve. Some of the features that we notice out there, again, the signage, the roadway with the condition, the electrical signing. There's trash bins that's out there, so it is an active park facility, and they do accommodate features for that. And then this is just an example of one of the many culverts that we observed. And of course, we have friends out there. We have our pets, per se. We can even adopt a mascot, GMX, if we want. But we do have wildlife, and they are not scared of us, to say the least. They are right on the edge of the road, and you deal with it. So next steps for us is to continue our coordination with our partners. We're going to be setting up more meetings. Really, at this point, is to establish what is the GMX role in this road moving forward. We were given this road legislatively, so I feel that we do have a responsibility there. We need to define what that is. Chairwoman Cancio did bring up a good point, and is identify what the liabilities are for this jurisdiction now. To make sure that we are maintaining the roadway and we are being good stewards, and we don't have any impacts for anything that negatively that may happen. We want to make sure that we're coordinating all this moving forward. And then we'll continue follow-up assessments of the road moving forward, whether it's, depending on how these coordinations go, whether it's annual, biannual, periodic visits, just to ensure and coordinate any necessary improvements or work that's needed as time goes by.
Yeah, for the record, there's no bathroom in our stretch of the 16 and a half miles,
There is
right?
no bathroom in our section. There is one it's called the Gator Hook Trail, just past the Collier County line, between 8th Street and the Monroe Collier County line. It's I'll refer to it as a porta potty on steroids. It's not exactly a bathroom, and I would recommend that if you go out there, you take plenty of mosquito repellent because they are there, and they are bigger than the ones that we're used to dealing with in our residences. So just be careful.
I had one question. Who was maintaining the loop road before?
National Park Services.
Okay.
So that area, the maintenance of the entire road is between the 3 county, 2 of the counties and national parks. So Collier County maintains their 4-mile segment. primarily what they do is they grade the road. They just go out there and even it out. And it's normally after big rainstorms where the water settling will create potholes and so forth, and then they come in. I will tell you that when we drove it, that was probably the worst drivable area. I mean, we really had to be careful in that little 4-mile segment. The Monroe County area was actually pretty decent, the unpaved section, and we were able to drive that with little impedance. And then you have the stretch that's paved that goes all the way to past and into the Miami-Dade County line, and Miami-Dade County maintains that piece. That 2-mile stretch in Miami-Dade County is where you have most of the residences. There's about a dozen or so homes right now that I think are mostly for the Miccosukee tribe residences, but they are being inhabited right now. They're using it. And then along the way, we saw some homes or structures that are being used for living, or some abandoned structures within the Monroe County area.
So we're responsible for the Monroe County portion, not the Dade County portion? Is that
That's
right?
correct. The legislation is very clear on the limits of what was dedicated to GMX, and it's the piece out with the limits of Monroe County to the west and Monroe County to the east. So it's that 16.5-mile stretch that was given to GMX.
Right. But in our meetings, our stakeholder meetings, Collier and Miami-Dade are involved.
So right now, the initial meeting was with Park Services
Right.
and Miccosukee Tribe, because we wanted to ascertain who is maintaining that road now.
Right.
They are involved in the entire loop, so the next step would be to reach out to the folks, maybe Collier Public Works, or to see who in Collier County is maintaining that stretch and how they do it, and then reach out to Miami-Dade County Public Works just to get to see how they're doing it, because we did notice that the paved area had been recently refurbished. It was either sealed or repaved, because the striping, the pavement markers, everything was in really good condition. The blacktop it seemed really fresh. So I think they said that they probably did it about like 8 or 9 months ago. So, and it's noticeable because it's a really decent drive when you come in through the Dade County piece and then keep going on until you get to the gravel road.
Is that alligator paying tolls?
Excuse me?
The alligators are paying tolls? We need a toll
Well,
relief.
I don't know yet.
We probably need a toll relief program for the
Well,
alligator.
We'll make sure we ask that question in our coordination.
Thank you.
Oh, I think that we just have to be good stewards of this piece of property or this road. And I think there's no better agency than GMX to care for this. That obviously now is part of the Park Service, and now we'll be the stewards of that.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Olson. Chairwoman, you had asked about potentially putting some signage out there delineating our lines and our responsibility. I think through the ongoing coordination, we'll see how we incorporate that and be able to put that out there so that people understand and know who is responsible for that piece of road.
And also because it may take a long time from point A to point B in those 16 miles. How's the cell phone service? Do we have like any emergency phones in that road?
There's an antenna right at the end, right at the entrance, a cell antenna right at the entrance of the Dade County Loop Road entrance. That is pretty well. The signal pretty goes on, so we had no issues with our cell phone service throughout that ride. I will tell you that if you do venture to go out there,
Oh, I will.
have time, because of the pavement conditions, the speed limit, and the gravel, it could take you anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours just to get through that whole 23-mile segment.
But that brings up a good point, actually. I think in addition to being good stewards, we have to also make sure it's a safe area. Now we have safety issues to be concerned about. Communication, I think, is very relevant. I don't know about the bathroom issue, but the safety issues is very
You
relevant.
see, for men, bathroom.
I know.
issues
That's
different.
fine. For me, it's all bathrooms. I'm fine.
16 miles.
Exactly. I have enough bathrooms there. So those are the kind of issues I think we're going to be looking at. at least will be interested in addressing.
No, absolutely.
And I'm glad Dade County has in with the road, and then we'll kind of obviously bring to the Collier County piece, because that's the exit out. So I think we'll have to talk about that.
Board Member Miller.
I think it's very appropriate that while we are by statute responsible, and it is important that we understand where we are, and that ultimately it is still a national park, and that anything we do has to be coordinated with that national park, and certain amenities or opportunities that we may think are important may or may not be appropriate in a national park. So we just need to be cognizant of that. Yes, it needs to be safe. Yes, it needs to be navigable, but we just need to be mindful of what we're doing.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. One, and I think I asked this question, but I don't remember yesterday because there was a lot of information coming my way. Obviously, there's no toll on that road. Is the legislation clear on, is this now just part of our system and we have to maintain it with revenues from the other roadways, or what's going to be the source of the revenue to handle the maintenance of that roadway?
So we've had initial internal discussions on that, and I don't want to take away from our CFO. Right now, we have jurisdiction of the road. I'm not sure how that definition goes into how we define the system. Per the trust indenture, the system is, and I'll let Marie kind of answer that question, because she's the money person, and I'd rather not cross that boundary. Yeah, no, and I don't want to get that ruler slap on the hand.
You have a bad reputation. I think it's under review at this point in time. Clearly, it's under our jurisdiction. But the entire expressway system, and we briefly touched upon this during our briefing yesterday, was that the entire expressway system is collateralized for the benefit of the bondholders. And it's very clear on how money is used and what order it is used. So I think that has to be a little bit more of a due diligence analysis with the legal team, how we go about financing any operational maintenance or any type of capital expenditures on this particular roadway. So I think it's still premature at this point.
And may I clarify, just with regard to the legislation, and as your attorney for liability reasons, the legislation defined the jurisdiction of GMX to include all of Miami-Dade County and that portion of Monroe County bounded by Loop Road and the border of Monroe County. It didn't transfer ownership of any assets in that area. In the same way, GMX isn't responsible for maintaining every roadway within Miami-Dade County, but has jurisdiction throughout the county. If it chose to extend an expressway into another part of the county, as is being considered right now, there would be an acquisition and a project to build that out. GMX now has jurisdiction if it chose to do something in that portion in the defined jurisdiction. But
Can we go back to the map, please, just so to clarify something?
I just wouldn't want anybody to leave here thinking that today GMX by statute has any liability and responsibility for anything that happens there, because at this point we haven't acquired ownership of those roads. We have jurisdiction if this board made a policy decision to do something in that area, extend a road, then at that point, that's where.
So looking at the map, that the portion in red is the road. You're saying that we have jurisdiction from that road up?
Yes, the language in the
rectangular?
statute, which I don't have in front of me, says.
I thought it was only the road. I did not know it was all that
No,
area.
it is jurisdiction for the area, the portion of Monroe County bounded by Loop Road and that whole area to the northeast up to. So, for instance, and this is what it came up in the litigation, and the judge this week said, no, you can't do any discovery, MDX County, on feasibility of building anything in there. It is in a national park right now. There could be, if there ever was a decision to extend an expressway through that area, which this hasn't even been considered at this point, then you have jurisdiction to begin that process of doing that. And would jump through all the permitting hoops and acquisition hoops that you go through. But it's not just the road within the jurisdiction. It is that whole area. And that doesn't, this was an appropriate assessment that has been done by the staff as to what is there. And they've determined all the various stakeholders that are now owning and maintaining that portion, and now have developed the communication, the contacts with those folks to coordinate anything that could be done.
So nothing really needs to change. We don't need to maintain that portion. We're not responsible then.
By statute, there is no financial obligation now placed on
So then no
GMX,
liability for us.
nor liability,
Some
even subject to
accident happens in the middle of that road. Okay, that's
Correct.
excellent.
I didn't want to leave here with
No, that was-
with any
that's-
impression that, because there's a lot
why
of
we need
lot
you,
of billboards
counsel.
and attorneys on them that like to hear things said and misinterpret them and
So I
place
think this
liability.
clarifies a lot for me and for staff, because we were having this conversation yesterday. Yes, board member.
When you say bounded by the loop road, is it inclusive of the loop road, or is the road not included in the?
I believe the way the text of the statute is written, it includes the road and that
Thank you.
that area.
But what's in, sorry,
There's nothing there.
is there anything there?
No, it's Everglades.
In that area?
Between the road and that Collier County,
Everglades.
No, it's Big Cypress.
Mhm.
It's our pets and our friends that live out there. Okay, and now the State Road 836 Miami River Bridge. As you all know, we've been looking at the safety concerns surrounding the bridge and the bridge piers and what's happening there. I will tell you that the replacement of the fender system is ongoing. The design is moving forward for the new fender system. We've actually received the preliminary designs to review, and we've provided comments, and that's getting done. So I think we're still on schedule to have that fender system replaced way ahead of time, or at least way ahead of the original schedule, which is about 2 years ahead of schedule. We've also early June, we sent out the letter to the river stakeholders, basically just stating our position on, where we were at, what we were going to be doing in response to the unfortunate incident that occurred in Maryland. And just, point out that we want to make sure that we are taking all the safety precautions necessary to prevent and mitigate any potential dangers. The river folks did confirm through email, I don't have it in writing yet, but they did confirm through email that they do currently have tug and tow procedures for larger ships that go through this area. It's all based on weight and really for like the more cargo companies. They currently have that, and that they do plan to maintain that procedure for these large vessels. And primarily it's more of an insurance requirement to these big companies, which is a good thing because their premiums, I guess, obviously go up if they don't use this tug and tow method. So bigger ships that can do much greater damage to the piers in this area do get pulled through this area of the river, which is comforting for us because now we know that there's a physical safety measure for them. Aside from the improvements we're doing, we'll also continue to look at how to mitigate any other things that could potentially happen in the open areas inside the piers between the two components. That's more of the non-navigable where people can stray into. That would be for more smaller recreational boats. Even though our piers are designed to take some impact, we want to make sure that we mitigate or try to prevent that. But that will require coordination with the Coast Guard, South Florida Water Management, because anything we put in there is going to be subject to review by them to make sure that we're not impeding any of the natural river flow, any of the current river operations, and any buildup of sedimentation because of structures that we might put into the water. This is what's been relayed back to us in terms of they're not saying they would be opposed to anything we would do in the future, but they would just want to make sure that whatever we do takes these factors into consideration. So we will be looking at that aside from the project that's going on right now to make sure that we are considering every potential safety improvement or upgrade to ensure that we do everything that we can to prevent any incidents.
Board Member Pages?
No, I think you're.
Thank you. So I'm just trying to understand, obviously, with the piers are ship impact, and we have the channel denoted and channel protection. It would be very unusual to protect anything other than the channel, given that we have ship impact piers. I just want to kind of understand what we're contemplating, given that would be different than any other structure that I'm aware of
Well,
in the state.
I think the only thing that we would consider at this time, and again, this is something we're evaluating and see if it would make sense, would be maybe putting some kind of dolphin structures outside of the navigable channel, but to further protect the areas between the non-navigable. So you see in the picture, you have some segments that
Oh, I
ships can
understand.
get into, and we would want to make sure that nothing can get into these areas that we don't want to, or that can potentially cause any damage. So you have, like, for example, you might have.
Okay, it's just highly unusual and not indicative of any other structure that I'm aware of, other than protecting the navigable waterway. We have pier columns on all of our structures that are ship impact designed. We review, inspect, et cetera, but we only ever protect the channel. So I just want to be mindful that we're not doing something not indicative of design features that are appropriate for structures.
Yes.
I'm a little fuzzy on the language you just used as far as tug and tow. Is tug and tow required?
It's not a requirement
So it's not.
by the Coast Guard or any regulatory agency.
So they provide the service, but it's up to the
It's
ship
up to the companies
take
to
it or
use
not.
it. Now, what we've learned through our conversations is that these bigger cargo companies, they do employ these services because it helps them on their insurance. It's a benefit to them on the insurance premiums that they pay. So if they don't have this service, then they pay much higher insurances to cover for these, to have the coverage there for these potential accidents or whatever. So they do that now, and they say that they're going to continue to do that moving forward, that they have no intent to remove that from their operations.
No. They clearly don't have intent to remove it. My concern is I want to make sure that all large ships that could take out the pier, the columns, are towed through that area. That's really,
But who has jurisdiction to say that?
Coast Guard does. The Coast Guard does, right?
I believe the Coast Guard has the jurisdiction through the navigable
Okay.
waters.
So are we scheduling meetings with the Coast Guard on this matter? I mean, I appreciate the fact that the service is there, and I appreciate the fact that they continue to provide it, and that's all great. But it still hasn't mitigated my concern.
So the letter that we reached out was in general for all the stakeholders, including the Coast Guard.
Okay.
So we haven't heard back from them directly, but we can follow up to get their position on that. But what we've learned is that they don't have a requirement in place for these ships.
So, just elaborate. There's a requirement for any ship that draws more than 7 feet coming in through government cut to have a pilot and a tow. Once they get to the delta of the river, the Coast Guard no longer requires it. It's not just for premiums. Insurance companies are actually requiring them to have a tow. Now, those are for cargo vessels. For pleasure boats, there is no requirement. And as we know in Miami, there's very large private vessels, over 100 foot, that are going through it that do not require and do not utilize tug and tow. But for an actual regulation, there is no regulation. We have had meetings with the Coast Guard. They have a lot of concerns about putting things in the river more than anything because the navigable channel is already narrow. In that particular area is only 75 feet wide. and they don't have any regulation to actually require them to use tug and tow.
So they're concerned about putting anything in the river?
Yes, in
But
general.
yet, but yet it's okay if a big ship goes through there without it.
Yes, there's a lot of concern about putting things in the river that, one, impede flow, and that's more for South Florida water management, and B, that would prevent because the Coast Guard has a concern. For example, if a ship gets stuck underneath the bridge, they need to have a way to get around it. And so if you put a big dolphin in it, then they have a concern.
Oh yeah, no,
with
no,
it.
I get that. I get that. Not again. The concern continues to be large ships going through there without a tug. That can take out the pier,
Yes.
if intentional, obviously. If not, even if it's not intentional. So I'm not, and I know we're working on the 2-year plan and everything else, but I'm not sure that that risk has been mitigated. And not sure why they won't come to the table to have that conversation.
And by the way, we're just to be clear, we're not the only crossing. There's about 13 bridges along the Miami River. So
Yeah, absolutely.
that regulation would have to go through the entire, from the delta of the river all the way to basically the lock here. We've had meetings with them. They're very reluctant to actually making a requirement for that, because that affects obviously all the
No, I understand that,
cargo.
but that happens to be probably the bridge with the highest traffic volume.
I would
Down
say
the river.
honestly they're fairly equal, because the reality is that those cargo ships start at the delta, have to go through First Street, Flagler, 3rd, 8, 12, all the way to get to basically this area that's down here. So they have to go through a series of 9 or 10 movable bridges just to get to the cargo areas, the loading areas. So it's not just us. It's a good thing about our bridge is actually our bridge is one of the easiest ones, because it's a straight shot and it's a long tangent section. Like that first initial part of the delta, right where it snakes through downtown, that's probably the worst part. If you've ever seen that, that's quite difficult. I don't think any boat captain in their right mind in the cargo ship would try to go through there without a tug and tow, just because they just won't make the curves.
Okay.
But they are the agency that regulates the travel underneath the bridge.
Board Member Blanco?
But to piggyback off of Board Member Page's, to what extent could we manage the conversation to see if that could be enforced? If it's because of the fact that we are, we're the ones that manage this particular property.
So they have the jurisdiction of the actual river. We are there by easement, actually. Our piers in the water are there by easement. So we can talk to them, we can try, we can ask. We've sent letters. Director Toledo has sent letters to them requesting us to meet and to implement further protections. But ultimately, it's up to the Coast Guard to determine whether they're going to make a requirement.
If they decide not to make it a requirement, I hope we can get that in writing.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. Nah, I mean,
I may
We've
be
been trying.
overstepping, but
No,
that's
no,
that's my thought on it.
Because it's a federal agency, is maybe an opportunity to maybe involve some of our federal elected officials to help, to bring Coast Guard to the table.
Absolutely. And Claudio, or Juan, I thought they were going to speak to the regular coordination meetings as well, maybe just to explain all the stakeholders who are at those meetings. But yes, Vice Chair, you are correct. I'll put that down as a point of for us going forward.
So as part of the project, we do have ongoing coordination meetings with all the folks on the river. At the beginning of the project, it was much more regular, and there was, the agenda items were probably a little bit bigger. Now that those have tapered off to, I think they meet either monthly or bi-monthly, depending on what's going on in the area. But again, through those meetings, we continue to bring up these concerns. We want to get them to, address this with us. And yeah, we want to get everything in writing so that we know where we stand. And then again, we will do whatever we can. We'll evaluate all the options and see what is the right thing to do.
So yes, and I actually, following up on I think we need to be more forceful as far as documenting with our federal partners of what we're asking for. We're not, I don't believe we're being unreasonable. There could be very good reasons why they couldn't do it or wouldn't do it or whatever, and that's fine. But we owe the public, and we owe the people driving over that bridge, and we owe the citizens of this county that we thoroughly mitigate as much risk as we can on that issue.
If I could, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So based on collective direction from the board, I know you gave authorization on the first letter that we sent. It's been 2 months now, 3 months. So we will do a follow-up to the delegation and to the appropriate partners, and I'll circle back with the board once that is complete.
Thank you.
I got one quick question before we leave this topic. Sorry to beating a dead horse here. The requirement of the tug and tow and the pilot boat for entry through government cut into the port, whose requirement is that? Is that
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
US Coast
And the tug and tow operation, is that some kind of a public service, or is that a private entity that?
Private entities.
And they have multiple ones, or there's just for the Port of Miami, there's only one tug and tow operation?
No, there's so the pilot is
part of the port.
Yeah, but the actual tug and tow operations, those are private entities that
Multiple.
supply. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
DOT also has a bridge. The river goes over I-95.
I have lots of bridges.
Yeah, but very similar to ours, in the same type of configuration. You have all of. I was just looking at it.
Again,
There's
that's why
7.
I mentioned that we need to be respectful of the criteria associated with the design, maintenance, and operation of these structures, and whatever additional. We can't add things that are not appropriate.
It's under evaluation and consideration.
Right, that's all we can do is consider them, but there are a number of structures, including those owned, operated, and maintained by FDOT, the county, as well as GMX, that are all along this navigable waterway, and there is a responsibility of all of us for consistency and ensuring that we are meeting the requirements, which is why we design our structures to a certain criteria.
The reality is that after Surfside, the building collapse, a lot of things changed, and we're having this conversation right now after the bridge collapse
Sure.
in Maryland, just so that I think it's the time that since we were going to reinforce that bridge in the future anyway, that this is why we're having this discussion. So I think the discussion is good to have.
I agree, and I think it's also imperative that we understand structures are designed differently in different locations, and having fracture critical structures versus non-fracture critical structures are also an important aspect. And this is a very different design than some of the structures that have failed previously.
Yes,
So we need to be mindful of that as well.
absolutely. So no more questions. Okay, regarding our project updates. So moving on to announcements. Our next scheduled board meetings are September 12th, 2024, and November 14th, 2024, both starting at 9 a.m. And board members, are there any questions, announcements, staff direction, final comments from board members before we adjourn? Hearing no additional comments, I adjourn this meeting at 11:16. Thank you.